Welcome to the Good Business Project. What does it mean to be a good business owner or to have a good business? How do you know your business is actually doing good? Well, I'm Christine and I was raised in small businesses and have built businesses of my own since those playground days selling bracelets. I since have grown businesses from the ground up, from my own brick and mortar to service-based businesses and online. This podcast is for you if you are ready to kick off those trends, sort through all the advice and noise, and build a business that truly works best for you. Let's dive into today's episode and continue the journey together to be the business owner that you want to be.
What if I had to start my online business from scratch? What would I do? That's what today's episode is all about, and I'm using a hot topic word called pivoting, and we're going to dive into the truth about pivoting, when it's good, when it's not, and share some of my own stories about pivoting. The truth is, I have pivoted more times in 7 months than I ever thought was possible. I never knew I would need to pivot myself so much in my online business. The funny thing is, the word pivoting to me, I always take it to the basketball court. I grew up playing basketball. My daughter is 12 and she plays travel basketball. And I also have a 7-year-old daughter that's now learning basketball as well. So I get this mental picture of leaving one foot on the ground and only lifting your other foot around in order to get where you need to get the ball to go. And I think that visual is just so helpful for me when it comes to pivoting inside a business. Today's episode, I want to dive into when it's good to pivot, when it's not good to pivot, what a pivot even really means, and just talk about it, because I feel like more than anything, we kind of overuse the word pivoting, and we maybe need to just get some clarity around what an actual pivot is. So pivot is actually simply changing direction in response to feedback, market shifts, or a need for deeper realignment. The role of pivoting inside of your business really should be for growth. Pivoting is inevitable. It's going to happen. And actually, I always say businesses that don't pivot or don't learn to change as the market is telling them or feedback comes in, they're going to end up being stagnant. They're not going to see the growth that other people see in their businesses. And I've seen this in restaurants and coaching businesses and retail, in the fashion industry. If you're not willing to shift and move with the market or as feedback comes in, it is going to keep you from growing inside your business. So pivoting really is important. Every successful business goes through pivots, multiple pivots before they hit their stride. So here is the deal though. Pivoting actually can be a negative thing as well. I actually have pivoted more times than I should. There were multiple times that fear came in and told me things that maybe this wasn't going to work, or I needed to move away because it wasn't selling, it wasn't going well. And really the fear was talking to me when I needed to stick it out. I needed to be consistent. I needed to see what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. I needed to stop assuming. And sometimes I feel like pivoting can be an easy thing for us to say, like, I just don't feel like this is working, or I'm afraid it's not, or I'm not feeling good enough. And it's kind of like my episode I talked about making a good business decision. We need to ask ourselves, are we stressed? Are we insecure? Or are we pressured before we pivot? Sometimes a pivot is a way to just align more closely with your strengths and your passions. Sometimes when we start something, we're not fully in tune with what that is. And I am the first to tell you that as I go, I learn more and more about myself. And it should be natural to pivot more into certain directions as it's going. But a knee-jerk reaction or a fear that is driving ship can sometimes cause pivots that are harmful. So here's the important thing. Just because you need to pivot or the market is telling you you've gotten feedback, or you're feeling out of alignment in your business, it doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that it's a negative or a bad thing. Actually, pivoting and being open to pivoting means that you're adaptable and you're willing to course correct and you're willing to get that feedback where so many people are not. So there's this balance of being both adaptable and willing to pivot, but also willing to stick it out and try things and be consistent. Pivoting can become a problem. There can be brand confusion when you change things too quickly. There can be lack of focus or direction and not knowing, like, what should my content be about? There can be emotional burnout when you've changed directions too fast. You're burning yourself out. Signs that you might be pivoting too much is when you have shiny object syndrome. You feel like you need to change all the time because something else seems like a better way to do it. And man, do we see this online all the time. Oh, that reel looked like it worked for her. I'm going to try that. I think that might work better for me. Feeling these frequent shifts without results. If you've been pivoting every few months and you're not seeing progress, it's probably a sign that you've been pivoting too soon or you're not playing things out long enough. Consistency is key, and you need to know the red flags of when it's time to pivot. But my biggest lesson here in all of this is probably just this one thing: to slow down, like not pivot too soon, to let it play out and not give your following and the people who are watching you like whiplash from changing directions too fast. I myself have done that inside my business and it does not go over well. My sales fall flat on their face. My products all of a sudden no longer make sense. I think that the pivot makes sense, but they are taking in that content at a much slower pace. They're not me. They're not inside my head. And pivoting is something that can be very confusing, and it needs to be something that is thought out. So to recap what I'm saying, because I feel like we have multiple directions here we can go with pivoting, is pivoting is good if you are adaptable and you're willing to receive that feedback, but you also need to be cautious to not pivot too much or too quickly or just think something's not working. Make sure you're not feeling that pressure and feeling insecure or stressed or letting fears drive you into a pivot. Make sure it's truly something for alignment, for where you want to go in your business, or it's feedback that your market is giving you, and you are slowly and methodically putting strategy in place to take that pivot. So, what makes a pivot successful? One, make sure you're not overhauling everything at one time. Make small iterations and test their effectiveness. I have made this mistake so many times. I wish somebody would have told me. Every time I would get this clarity in a pivot and know it's the direction I need to go, I would almost redesign my entire website, change my brand colors, literally just change everything. And I can see why that didn't go so well. Now what I do is I test reels or I test story slides, and I slowly change colors and I slowly move things around and make sure okay, this color seems to be responding better than this color. This font seems to be responding better than this font. These words seem to relate better than these words. It is important to test and take time. Each pivot you make should have a very clear reason behind it, whether it's because you need to get in alignment with yourself more, whether your target audience needs are shifting, your product that you're about to offer is shifting, whatever it may be, it needs to be for a very clear and methodical purpose. How do you know for sure it's time to go ahead and start making these pivots in your business? One, if your audience is clearly not engaging with anything you're putting out, it's time to reconsider. Is this working? You're getting no engagement. It's not going anywhere. You've tried all different angles. Nothing is working. It's time to look to see if you need to pivot. Number 2, if your current model is leading to financial strain without a clear plan to profitability, a pivot might be necessary. This is one of the reasons I teach your recurring revenue inside of my programs, because I think it's really, really important to lay out a plan inside of your business. If you don't have a clear plan financially, then you might need to pivot and create a new business model that allows you to get rid of that financial strain. A loss of passion or alignment. This has happened to me before. I had built an entire business on a product that I did not deeply resonate with. I had realized that I was not passionate about it long term, that I wasn't going to be able to talk about it forever, that I was feeling burnt out and my energy wasn't there. Pivoting was totally necessary, but pivoting slowly and methodically was what I did not do that time. So the difference is, I just recently made a pivot, which is why I'm here in my podcast. And it has gone so much better because I've slowly released content moving towards the message of having a good business and an aligned business and a business that feels more like you, and moving that message. And it has gone 1,000 times better. I did not see a decrease in my sales like I did before. I've stayed engaged. I've had still solid reel views. I've seen really good metrics despite the slow pivot. And so now I know that a successful pivot really just needs some intentionality and strategy inside of it to make sure that I'm not just fleeing from failure or a fear I have, but instead I'm really excited about the new opportunities ahead. So, when should you stay the course and not pivot? We always say that you're not consistent enough. I feel like I see this on social media all the time, that consistency really is key. Consistently doing the right thing is key. I think we always need to clarify that. But sometimes sticking with a decision longer than you like actually brings success. I oftentimes get tired of saying the same things over and over again, but I've learned that the average customer needs to hear or see something 7 times before they decide whether it's for them or not. And so the value of consistency and saying something even just 7 times is really freaking important. Building mastery comes through focus and commitment. So don't just change your strategy too quickly when things get tough. Instead, make sure you're giving it time to take shape and allowing yourself just to take a deep breath and make sure that assumptions are not driving your ship. I am queen at that sometimes, of just being like, this is not going well. I can see the train wreck happening ahead and I need to back out the back door. Long-term vision, make sure your vision is extremely clear and you always keep these long-term goals in mind. Don't pivot just because things seem immediately like they're pointing that direction. Instead, make sure you're assessing. And I always say, if you have your Find Your Flow workbook, that's a good place to assess whether you're actually getting closer to your goals or not. You should be able to see that inside of some type of format. What are my goals? Where am I going? What is my why? What is my vision? And am I getting closer to it? If you are and you're inch by inch getting there, then maybe it's not time to pivot yet. The other thing is, really sticking to the plan is another form of resiliency. There are going to be ups and downs inside of your business, and you need to stay grounded in your vision and your mission. There are going to be times that you feel like there's crickets or you feel like it's really hard. Just because something gets tough doesn't mean that it's not good. It pays to stick to the plan more times than not. When I realistically look back at my business, I can tell you that I would say 4 of my 5 pivots were completely unnecessary, and I should have done them slowly, methodically, and over time. And I'm not even sure they would have been pivots. They just would have been more incorporated in my strategy. So the big takeaway here is success does often come from staying the course when things get hard and making sure you're not giving up too soon. to recap what we just talked about here, yes, consistency pays off. Yes, staying the course pays off. But a pivot is only necessary when you feel, A, I'm completely out of alignment and my energy is going nowhere good. I'm not getting anywhere near my goals, or your market is screaming at you that this is not working. So if I were starting over today, I definitely would slow my rear end down. I would tell myself that pivoting doesn't need to be so freaking quick, and that I can be way more methodical about how I pivot. And I would tell myself that focusing on consistency and making sure my message was really, really clear is where I would put forth my effort to make sure that across all of my content, I'm saying the same things and thinking of my long-term goals. Like if I could start back at square one, I would have made my long-term goals way more apparent and make sure that I am being consistent in every product and every message and everything I'm saying, that they would all thread together really, really nicely. So start with that clarity in your vision, your niche, and make sure that you know your goals. If you are like starting fresh with an online business, this is exactly what I would tell you to do, is gain that clarity on where you want to go, what problems you want to solve, what pain points you want to bring solutions to. And then number 2, give it freaking time. Let your strategy breathe. Take time before you pivot and you knee jerk, and focus on long-term success and not just quick fixes. So if I were starting over today, I would commit to a plan longer before making any drastic pivots. That's hands down like one of my biggest regrets. I believe success truly requires time, and the more consistent and focused you are, the more clear your plan is, the more success you're going to face in your business. So if you're struggling with a pivot, or you're wondering whether you should stick something out or stay with your current plan, and maybe you don't know if the market research is pointing one way or another, or you're feeling some mixed emotions around the topic of pivoting, I would love to help with you. Make sure that you DM me on Instagram, send me an email, comment on YouTube. Let's really chat about pivoting, and pivoting being good or bad, or knowing how to do it or when to do it. I would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure that you like or subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on any of the podcast channels, I would love for you to subscribe there so that you get the notification when my podcasts go live every week. Thanks so much for joining, and I look forward to talking to you next week. See ya.